somebody! Hurry! Come on, let's go! Get on back! Stick him! Come on, now, get him back! We gotta have it back! Make it go! Make it go! Take it in! Take it in!
Hi, I'm Tom Brookshire.
And I'm Pat Summerall. Now that we're into the second half of the season, Tom, it might be a good time to try and analyze the top teams and see why they're on top.
Well, Pat, Miami 8-0 and Washington 7-1 are the two teams with the best records, and they do have several things in common. One is that it doesn't seem to matter much who's really the quarterback.
Both the Dolphins and Redskins have defensive units with a few big names, but they have virtually no weak points. They just both play great defense.
Well, they do, and on offense, they both seem to rely principally on their runners. And do they ever have the runners?
And do they ever? Larry Brown and Charlie Haraway and Butch in the Sundance and Mercury Morris down in Miami, they're just unbelievable.
They are. For the past 2 weeks, we've named running backs as our best of the week. And the way things are going this season, we may have to name a runner every week. But stay with us. We might surprise you with a defensive back or a place kicker.
That'll have to come after the season's over. In San Diego last week, the Chargers and the Dallas Cowboys played what amounted to an inter-squad game, as 3 former Charger players, plus ex-head coach Sid Gilman, were new Cowboys, and 4 former Cowboys were new Chargers.
The most illustrious and notorious of the Dallas-San Diego alumni did not stand at the head of the class. Yes, that was the famous escape artist in high-top shoes, Dwayne Thomas, who spent his warm-up time either practicing a 2-point stance or planning a new breakout. But it was not ex-Cowboy Thomas, but ex-Charger Mike Montgomery who upstaged the show by returning Leonard Dunlap's fumble 54 yards for a touchdown on the game's 4th play. From there, it was all downhill for the Chargers. Quarterback John Hadle spent the first half running for his life and lobbing misdirected passes. Leroy Jordan's interception set up a pretty counterplay touchdown by Walt Garrison, and Dallas led 17-0. Then Mike Montgomery, that old Charger ghost, rose up again and threw an option pass to Ron Sellers. On the next play, Craig Morton lofted an apparent touchdown to Sellers. Although a penalty denied the 6 points, Dallas later scored and then struck again, as Morton rolled left and sprinted to a touchdown that gave the Cowboys a 31-0 lead in the 3rd period. With such a surprising pad, Bob Hayes decided to warm up those old Olympic legs that had been rooted to the Dallas bench for several weeks. John Hadle decided to have some fun too, so he arched a 46-yard touchdown to Chuck Dicus as the 3rd quarter ended. Hadle's fun-loving ways next touched Gary Garrison, who made an almost impossible catch, and suddenly it was 31-14 Dallas. Minutes later, Hadle threw his 3rd touchdown to uncovered Chuck Dicus. With the Chargers now trailing 34-21, they got the ball again, but the alumni hijinks became too much for Dwayne Thomas, so he left a bit early. What he missed was Hadle's 4th touchdown pass. With time running out, Hadle tossed up a rainbow that Dave Williams neatly caught up with. Given more time, there would be no telling what Hadle might have done, but Dallas won this class reunion 34-28.
Elsewhere in the NFC East, for the 2nd week in a row, the Washington Redskins traveled to New York, and they took a big bite out of the Big Apple.
This time, the happy ice cream eaters from Washington chewed up the Spearmint Gang out in Flushing, Long Island.
With Billy Kilmer replacing the injured Sonny Jurgensen, the George Allen Ice Cream Company remains in high gear, showing its back to the rest of the NFC East. Meanwhile, Weeb Eubank, the rotund brains of the Spearmint Gang, has the Jets rolling on the flashy right arm and whispering knees of Joe Namath. But this Shea Stadium contest with the Washington Redskins was vital to their playoff hopes. It was Billy the Tough Kilmer and not Nifty Joe who opened the game with a stunning strike. With Early Thomas and Chris Farasopoulos in his wake, Roy Jefferson brought home the bomb. The Redskins went up by 7. But Namath measured a 40-yard drive in 7 plays, sending John Riggins over right tackle to leave the first period tied 7-7. It looked as if the Jets were in control when Kilmer again sighted long for Jefferson and found the Jets' number 48, Gus Holloman, who added a 25-yard return. But New York was made to settle for a field goal and a 10-7 lead. On the next series, undaunted by the interception, Billy the Tough put the ball up once again under pressure. A different angle on a replay will show us what Billy had a worm's eye view of. An accurate, hurried heave caught number 42, Charlie Taylor, in stride. And striding Charlie strode 40 more yards to complete a 70-yard touchdown play. On the next play after the kickoff, Namath misconnected to the Redskins' Chris Hamburger. With strong blocks from Mike Bass and Verlin Biggs, Hamburger returned 41 yards to a sudden 21-10 lead at the half. Late in the third period, Billy Kilmer turned to Larry Brown on a screen pass. Brown, who had been fairly shackled for 44 minutes, then burst his chains. Flexing his enormous desire, he ran 89 yards on a painful ankle to put the Jets behind 28-10. In the fourth period, Joe Namath hit Don Maynard with a 15-yard scoring pass to make it Jets 17, Redskins 28. But Namath could do no more. Buried under Bill Brundage, the football squirted to Verlin Biggs, and number 89 veered into the end zone. The huge ex-Jet, Verlin Biggs, has been one of the happiest ice cream eaters of all. And this afternoon, as he has been all season, the mighty Biggs was the biggest factor in the battle for the line of scrimmage. He was on top of Namath for the first 3 sacks of the game. And now that he stood in glory with the pigskin in trust, the Redskins seemed unwilling to let him out. Meanwhile, Joe and the Jets left beaten, 35-17. But a joyous Billy Kilmer would stand up in front in the locker room where George Allen would exhort his ice cream men to 3 more cheers for the Redskins.
Well, it's easy to kick a team when they're down, and even easier to kick 2 at the same time, but I'm going to refrain from doing that. So let's just sit back and watch the classic of ineptitude.
Last week, Philadelphia was the meeting place for a gaggle of flightless birds as the lowly regarded Eagles faced the lowly regarded Cardinals. Both teams displayed athletes who had trouble controlling their actions and reactions. The Eagle runners couldn't establish any sort of a running game. When Philly quarterback Pete Lisk was able to get his passing game going, he quickly negated his gains with errors. Once he lost a fumble at the Cardinal 1, and once he hit an ineligible and inhuman receiver. When it wasn't Pete Lisk, the Eagles had other players capable of killing scoring drives. Meanwhile, the St. Louis quarterback, Tim Van Gelder, was faring no better. He killed a couple of his own scoring drives by throwing in the vicinity of the Eagles' Bill Bradley. Bradley is an all-out ball player and one of the very few Eagles who is coveted by other teams in the NFL. Although shaken up a bit on this play, he came back with a vengeance. On this play, Van Gelder hit his favorite receiver, and Super Bill had his 7th interception of the season. He also finished the day with as many hookups with Van Gelder as the leading Cardinal receiver had. Finally, with the score tied at 6-6 with 17 seconds left, the Cardinals' Jim Bakken missed what could have been the winning 27-yard field goal. And in the end, those poor birds of a feather stuck together at 6.
About this time last year, Pat, the Eagles didn't look that bad. In fact, the New York Giants didn't look like they belonged in the same league with the Eagles last year.
You know, Tom, I think the big difference with the Giants this year is, one, the return of Ron Johnson, and two, the incredible start of old number 16 at quarterback.
Bolting out of the pack came old number 16 as Norm Snead and the Giants looked for victory number 5 against the Denver Broncos. Right from the start, the old general cranked it up and let it fly. Unfortunately for Snead, Rich Houston was just a fingertip from 6 points. Undaunted, Norman kept on firing, but the Broncos hung tough as Charlie Greer picked Bob Tucker's pocket clean and stole the ball. Finally, Snead solved the Bronco defensive riddle with some sleight of hand to tight end Bob Tucker. Then Snead connected with Tucker in a more conventional manner, and the big tight end turned a 3-yard pass into a 32-yard gain. Another newfound ally was tough-running Joe Orduno, number 49, who replaced injured running back Charlie Evans. Orduno's roughhouse style netted him 6 points when he soared over the stacked Bronco defense. The Giant defense furnished the 3rd touchdown when Jim Files snatched away a pass from Bobby Anderson and raced to a 19-0 Giant lead at the half. 4 men had a hand in Denver's first score as the ball went from Steve Ramsey to Floyd Little to Bobby Anderson to completely forgotten Riley Odom's number 88. But the Giants rebounded smartly when Snead hooked up with Ron Johnson, who barely held on long enough. The beaten Broncos saved their best for last as Floyd Little rocked and socked to a 55-yard touchdown. But Little's individual brilliance was not enough to stave off the Giants, who won their 5th game 29-17.
The featured attraction last week was in the black and blue division. It was the rematch between 2 young men who were vying for the title of toughest quarterback in the NFL.
When the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions meet, all flashy, daring, and provocative activities are held at halftime. The rest of the afternoon is basic Central Division football, where it's tough to tell the quarterbacks from the linebackers without a program. Brawling Bobby Douglas, number 10, lost his helmet but gained enough ground to set a season's record for quarterback rushing. In only 8 games, Douglas broke the record number 11 Greg Landry had set in 14 games last year. If Landry was disappointed, he certainly didn't show it. Although Douglas set the record, Landry outgained him for the day. But in the battle of running quarterbacks, only one statistic really mattered. Behind a double block by number 36 Steve Owens, Landry slid in for 6 points to provide the Lions with all the scoring they would need on this day. Landry's score, along with a short Owens touchdown, put Detroit up 14-0 after a half. But then the Bears closed off Landry's other avenue of attack. 4 times Chicago diverted Detroit's air game with interceptions. 2 by cornerback Joe Taylor, number 20, as they shut the Lions out in the second half. But the damage had already been done as Detroit zeroed in on Chicago's one-man show and threw him for a shutout. Even in defeat, Douglas had set yet another record, most times losing helmet, career, breaking Kent Lyle Birdley's mark of 37 set in the 20s when helmets were made out of cardboard. And in the end, the Lions had the only record that really mattered, 5-3 to tie them for first in the Central Division.
You know, Tom, it's a funny thing about those Lions. They've beaten the arch-rival Bears 9 times in the last 10 tries. But against the arch-rival Minnesota Vikings, they have lost 9 in a row.
Pat, this week for Detroit, it's the rematch with those Vikings. And last week, Minnesota warmed up against New Orleans by allowing their fewest points of the season and by scoring their most points of the season.
The once powerful Vikings entered the second half of the season with only 3 victories, none of them at home. The once fearsome Viking defense had reached the passer less than once per game. But last week brought the New Orleans Saints, and for once the Vikings looked not only purple, but powerful. This fumble return by number 40, Charlie West, was disallowed, but West later had another chance to be spectacular. The NFC's top-rated defense intercepted Archie Manning 3 times. Fran Tarkenton's record was better. In 26 attempts, he completed 19 passes, some of which made quite an impression upon the field photographers. Tarkenton also threw 2 touchdown passes, one to the oldest running back in pro football, Bill Brown, a still spry 34-year-old. Tarkenton's other touchdown was more like the kind we have come to expect from frantic Francis. Tight end John Beasley got credit for this touchdown, and when the score got high enough, a new passing combination was born. Number 19, backup quarterback Bob Lee, to number 42, wide receiver John Gilliam. This 63-yard pass and run, the Vikings' longest of the year, set the stage for the same combination to finish the scoring. Minnesota prepared for first-place Detroit by polishing off last-place New Orleans 37-6.
The Cleveland Browns have been somewhat of a surprise this year. So far, they're still in a race that almost everybody thought they'd be out of by now.
However, their opponent of last week is not only out of the title race, Pat, but is so far down in the standings that you wonder if maybe they haven't struck oil.
Last week, the Houston Oilers came gushing into Cleveland, long overdue for a win. And early in the first period, quarterback Dan Pastorini led them to the Browns' 1-yard line, where they failed to score on 4 attempts. That was just the beginning of yet another long day for Houston, whose troubles and errors seem unending. Meanwhile, Browns quarterback Mike Phipps was having trouble identifying and hooking up with his receivers. But Phipps eventually drove Cleveland to 2 field goals and 2 touchdowns by Leroy Kelly. Kelly's last score gave the Browns an easy 20-0 victory. And in Cleveland, there is a new hero to whom the fans flock. He is young Mike Phipps, who has led the Browns to 5 wins in the 7 games he has started. And all of a sudden, the Paul Warfield trade is beginning to bear fruit in Cleveland.
Well, Cleveland's victory kept the Browns only 1 game out of first place in that AFC Central, Pat.
But now, Tom, they trail only 1 team, as the 2 teams that were ahead of them, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, met last week in a battle for first place.
2 teams that had their problems last season have emerged from the woods this season to battle for their division title. Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh was the site of the Steelers-Bengals clash to determine a division leader, as both teams showed up 5-2. Earlier this season, Cincinnati beat the Steelers 15-10, but they've been looking over their shoulders ever since. The character of the game was determined from the outset. On Cincinnati's first play from scrimmage, Ken Anderson and Doug Dressler slopped up a handoff, and Dwight White recovered on the Bengals 7. In a critical game for both teams, Pittsburgh got the first break and cashed in on the very next play, Johnny Fuqua doing the cashing. Too often in the past, the Steeler defense had created breaks that went unfulfilled by an inconsistent offense. But this season, the Steelers are a complete team. And now, when the defense holdeth, the offense moveth the ball. Later in the first period, Glenn Edwards returned 54 yards to set up a field goal. Leading 10-0, the defense held again, and Steeler quarterback Terry Bradshaw went after more. Frank Lewis's great catch was out of bounds, and another field goal resulted. On their next drive, the Steelers would go all the way. Number 1 draft pick Franco Harris accounted for 56 yards of a 4-play, 84-yard drive. The last 28 were garnered when Bradshaw spotted Lewis again, this time safely in bounds. By halftime, the Steeler lead ballooned to 26-0 when Bradshaw threw his second touchdown pass to tight end Larry Brown, ridiculously wide open in the middle of the Bengals secondary. Only once in the first half did Cincinnati threaten. Late in the half, Anderson passes began to move the Bengals. With a first down on the 9, Anderson spotted Essex Johnson, number 19. Unfortunately, he failed to notice Steeler middle linebacker Henry Davis. The Steelers lead the NFL in interceptions this season, an improvement in the one area that has long haunted them. Trailing by 26 at the half, the Bengals needed a drastic change. So for the second half, Paul Brown inserted Virgil Carter, number 11 at quarterback. And Carter found success using play action and rollout passes. Carter finally spotted Chip Myers, number 25, to set up one score, and later hit him for a touchdown. But Cincinnati's 14 third-quarter points were quickly negated by the Steeler offense. Bradshaw's third touchdown pass and Lewis's second scoring catch put the Steelers out of Bengal reach, and in the fourth quarter, the Steelers ran away and hid. A 31-yard burst by Harris set up his short touchdown plunge as the Steelers ran up 40 points. Harris rushed for 101 yards, the third time in 4 weeks that the big rookie runner has hit the century mark. Trailing 40-17, Carter's only recourse was to throw, and the Steelers, aware of his plight, stormed in. Having thoroughly bounced their closest pursuers, the Steelers are indeed looking like the team to beat in the AFC Central Division. Only one team in all of the NFL has scored more points than the Steelers, while only 4 teams have given up fewer points. This great blend of defense and offense has everyone in Pittsburgh smiling as the Steelers near their first division title ever.
A couple of weeks ago, the Buffalo Bills scared the seaweed out of the Dolphins by almost beating them. But last week in Buffalo, Miami proved to the Bills that although they are in the same division, they're not really in the same league.
This is Miami coach Don Shula, a man who is bidding to become the first ever to lead a team to victory in every game of its season. And Coach Shula is making his bid without his ace of trump, the injured Bob Greasy. Replacing Greasy at quarterback is the wily veteran Earl Morrall. But last Sunday in Buffalo, the wily veteran had the Dolphins going nowhere early in the game. The Bills, who have come closer to beating the Dolphins than anyone else has this year, struck early as number 43 Tony Green stole a pass and sped in for 6. O.J. Simpson added sparkle and yardage to the stampeding Buffalo attack. Dennis Shaw's pass to number 33 Randy Jackson kept the Bills close and had the Dolphins so worried that they were forced to unleash the weapons. One weapon, of course, goes by the code name Mercury, wears number 22 and is pure devastation. Another Miami weapon is codenamed Zonk, wears number 39 and is pure destruction. And so, Mercury and Zonk chewed up yardage and got the Dolphins in close enough for Earl Morrill to thread the needle to number 80, Marv Fleming. Not wanting to miss out on the fun, the Dolphin defense descended on Dennis Shaw with malice as well as bad intentions. When they didn't sack Shaw, they rushed his throws and the secondary snapped them up. In the end, the Bills weren't even close as Mercury motored in for the Dolphins' 8th win in a row, 30-16.
In Los Angeles last week, yet another battle for leadership of the NFC West was contested. The outcome was all too familiar for the frustrated Atlanta Falcons.
Last week, Southern California Sunshine and 75,000 fans were ready for the first-place Western Division showdown between Los Angeles and Atlanta. But Falcon coach Norm Van Brocklin was taught to be skeptical of even the most ideal conditions. Before the game, he was caught checking wind currents, even though his team had rushed for 294 yards against the Rams 5 weeks before on the way to a 31-3 victory. But the Rams remember that game too, and led by number 74 Merlin Olsen, they slammed the Falcon running game down. Number 17 Bob Berry was willing to improvise, so he used his running backs in another role. Number 43 Dave Hampton scored on a flare pattern, and Berry liked what he saw. He adjusted his game plan and went to the air for a strike to number 82 Ken Burrow. But the play was called back when Berry was caught throwing from 1 yard past the line of scrimmage. This bit of good fortune was all the help that the defense would need. The Ramrodders cut into Berry's passing effectiveness with 2 interceptions, this one by linebacker Jim Purnell, number 53. As for the Ram air arm, it was still gimpy. So number 18, Roman Gabriel, threw sparingly and with little effect. Two Ram receivers teamed up on this incompletion, but the passing game wasn't needed as Los Angeles turned the tables on Atlanta and beat the Falcons with their own robust running attack. Willie Ellison and rookie Jim Bertelsen, number 45, accounted for most of the 202 yards rushing in both touchdowns. The running game and 2 David Ray field goals gave the Rams a 20-7 advantage. Then it was time for the on-again, off-again Ram defense to show its invincible side and clinch the victory. The Rams' 20-7 win gave them a game-and-a-half lead in the West and left the rumpled Falcons marveling at what a difference a few weeks can make.
The Rams look quite secure now, Tom, with their 1.5-game lead in the NFC West.
And in the AFC West, Pat, the Oakland Raiders also had a chance to increase their lead to a game-and-a-half over Kansas City, but the Chiefs had other ideas.
More than 82,000, the largest crowd in the history of the state of Missouri, packed Kansas City's new Arrowhead Stadium last week for the Chiefs and the Raiders. Oakland got close first, but cornerback Emmett Thomas rose up to stop Darryl LaMonica's only scoring threat of the day. In the second quarter, Lynn Dawson and the Chiefs got hot. First with a pass to running back Wendell Hayes, number 38. With only 1 minute left in the half, Dawson again dropped back to pass. From his back, Dawson called timeout, and with 38 seconds to play in the half, a play-action pass to rookie Robert West cleanly beat cornerback Willie Brown for a second Kansas City touchdown. Eight seconds later, Giant Buck Buchanan got past Giant Bob Brown and caused Oakland's third turnover, which Jan Stenerud converted into 3 more points, for a total of 17 in the last 5 minutes of the first half. In the third quarter, number 12, Ken Stabler, replaced Darryl LaMonica and finally got the Raiders' powerful offense in gear. Oakland's first score came when Stabler handed off to self-appointed chief antagonist Marv Hubbard, number 44. For the day, Hubbard gained only 18 yards and 8 carries and fumbled twice. But when his one moment of glory came, he didn't want any of the 82,000 Chief fans to miss it. The Raiders might have taken over the game in the second half, but for the efforts of number 14, Ed Podolak. Podolak rushed for 115 yards and broke the game open on a fourth quarter screen pass from Lynn Dawson. For the Raiders, Ken Stabler kept firing and wound up hitting 14 of 23, including a touchdown to tight end Ray Chester, number 87. As the crowd chanted, "We want Hubbard," the Raiders' final efforts to get back into the game were thwarted by the inspired Kansas City defense. The Chiefs finally had their first victory at Arrowhead, and with it a half-game lead over the arch-rival Raiders. The fans at Arrowhead will not soon forget their first victory.
After consecutive losses to Atlanta and Minnesota in 2 games they controlled but did not win, last week in Milwaukee, the Green Bay Packers faced a do-or-die Sunday against the San Francisco 49ers.
With John Brody injured, both he and Bart Starr were watching Steve Spurrier. After 6 years in the league, number 11 is still inexperienced, but he amassed 49 points the previous week against Atlanta, reviving San Francisco's sagging playoff hopes. Meanwhile, the resurgent Green Bay Packers were badly in need of a victory after 2 defeats, and their hopes were pinned to Scott Hunter, a quarterback of only 2 years seasoning. Hunter and the Pack depend on a dominating running game, and in their second series, MacArthur Lane established that with a 24-yard burst up the middle. Then in a 3rd and 1 situation, echoing his coach Bart Starr, Hunter hit John Brockington on a 48-yard play, and the Packers went up by 7. San Francisco returned 69 yards in 9 plays, with Vic Washington sweeping 2 yards to tie it at the end of the first quarter. But a Brockington explosion made it 14-7 in the 3rd period. Gaining 30 of 133 yards he would collect on 16 carries, Brockington burst free to score his 2nd touchdown of the day. They call him the crazed camel for his running style. And in the third period, Brockington scored his third touchdown after a 14-yard camel walk around left end. The mean green defense overruled the 49ers offense for 3 quarters, causing a paralysis of mistakes. This Vic Washington fumble set up a Chester Marcole field goal and a 24-10 Packer lead. Then, almost as if forced to do so, the 49ers forgot their plans for sustaining an offense and went for the big play. Gene Washington stepped out for a 62-yard catch and carry, closing the score to 24-17. A repeat of the play shows that Spurrier was well protected while waiting for Washington to beat number 28, rookie cornerback Willie Buchanan. And a perfect go and throw is still the most exciting play in pro football. But Gene Washington, in his 4th year out of Stanford, was not finished. After a Packer field goal, Spurrier found number 18 open over the middle. And 17 yards later, the score was Green Bay 27, San Francisco 24. Finally, with only 32 seconds remaining, the Pack iced a game they seemingly had won in the third quarter. Number 48, Ken Ellis, picked off a Spurrier sideline pattern, and Green Bay had a much-needed 34-24 victory to stay tied for the lead in the NFC Central with the Detroit Lions.
Quite a battle in Milwaukee, and it seems to me the difference between the two teams was a running back named John Brockington. 133 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, including a 48-yard touchdown pass. That's not a bad day's work even by Larry Brown standards.
It's sure not. And so for a change, our Best of the Week award this week goes to somebody other than Larry Brown. In fact, it goes to 2 other running backs. John Brockington of Green Bay would certainly be one of them. And the other would be a man we mentioned at the beginning of the show, Tom.
Well, he scored 2 touchdowns last week, Pat, and ran for 106 yards on only 11 carries. He's Eugene Mercury Morris, number 22 of the Miami Dolphins.
Like Larry Brown, he's in his 4th year. They're just about the same size, 5'10", 190, both of them from Pittsburgh. A lot in common.
Well, I think that Mercury might be a little quicker, maybe not quite as strong as Larry Brown, but they're both great, aren't they?
He's really been an asset to Don Shula and the rest of that running attack in Miami. Remarkable statistic about him is the fact that the first time he touched the ball as a pro, he went 105 yards.
That's the way we both started, right?
Gee, it's been so long I can't remember. Maybe it's lucky we can.
Let's go to the picks this week. I'm now 11-11, Pat.
Yeah, I'm 8-14, as long as I have to mention it.
New York at Washington.
Well, I'll be in Washington for that game, and I got to go with the Giants. I think they'll upset them.
Okay, I go with the Redskins again.
How about the next one, Oakland at Cincinnati?
I'm going to go back with the Raiders. I think John Madden will have them turned around.
Since they're at Cincinnati, I'll go with Paul Brown's men. Kansas City, Pittsburgh. That's at Pittsburgh.
Oh, I'm going to go with Art Rooney's Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they do have it all together.
For the first time, Kansas City against Oakland last week looked like the football team I thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year, so I'll go with them. Detroit, Minnesota. You always like the Lions.
I'm going to be up there. I'll go with the Lions. I think Greg Landry can score in Minnesota this year.
Okay, I've got the Vikes, and at any rate, we'll be back next week to show you what happens. I'm Pat Summerall.
I'm Tom Brookshire, and we'll see you next week.